And we're live. Hello, Ally.
And how about that? Only 3 minutes behind schedule. Who would have known?
That's not too bad. Not too bad considering the technological woes that are occurring around here.
Oh my goodness gracious. Hopefully, everybody, you can see this on my channels because I don't even know if it's working. But we're here. We're here with
Well,
another fabulous episode of Unscripted with Ally and Jenn, where we keep unscripted in unscripted.
we do. We do. Which I do believe is our best attribute is the off the cuff rolling with whatever happens. And I have heard feedback from others that they appreciate the fact that it is unscripted. And it's not fully unscripted. Like today we have an amazing guest, which I have the wrong banner up, so excuse that. Again, technology. So we have an amazing guest today talking with us about audiobooks. And so that's not unscripted. So for that, I give us brownie points. I think we get some
We
credit.
do get brownie points. And we've had some fabulous conversations on this show this year to bring lots of relevant topics and timely topics to the audience that's joining us. And so speaking of the audience, if you're here, let us know. Drop some liveliness and some love into the comments. As we bring Tina on, we want to make sure that you're getting your questions answered about audiobooks. We're here to learn as much as you are. Even though we're inside this space, I don't think Jen or I would consider ourselves experts by any means in the form of audiobooks, given what we each do in the world of publishing. So, and actually, speaking of what we do in the world of publishing, in case we have new viewers, we should probably just take like 10 seconds to let people know who we are and what we're bringing to the table. So, Jen, I shall pass the baton to you.
Beautiful. So my name is Jen Grace. I'm the founder of Publisher Purpose, and we are a nonfiction hybrid book publisher focusing on elevating thought leaders and those who want to get their messages out into the world in a much more meaningful and impactful way. Boom.
Excellent. So, boom sauce and succinct. And I am Ally Berthium. Just ignore that I and A, since everybody struggles with that last name. And I'm the CEO and founder of The Right Place, Right Time, where I help you get your manuscript developed as a book coach or ghostwriter and make sure that it is well sound before it's going on to people like Jen or Tina to publish or become an audiobook. So if you've got questions for either of us, of course, you can drop those in the comments as well. We will be keeping an eye on what's going on over there. So to introduce our topic for today, which is all things audiobooks, as people might have read in the description, audiobooks are like a big deal right now. So as of June 2024, an article in Science Publishers Weekly recorded that audiobook sales hit $2 billion this year, which is actually a 9% increase in reader consumption. And the Audio Publishers Association released highlights from its 2024 consumer survey showing that nearly 149 million Americans have listened to an audiobook. Now that's just scratching the surface and offering a few insider looks into this year and the world of audiobooks. But I know Tina, the fabulous Tina, who is waiting behind the studio. Oh, there she is popping in, has way more to share about the space. But before we dive in with questions and letting her tell us all the things, Jen, would you like to read her fabulous bio?
Oh, yes, I would love to. So, I feel like I want to do my own bio because not that I actually can, that Tina is amazing and fantastic. And everyone at Twin Flames is absolutely incredible. So Tina and I go back, I don't know how, I feel like we were trying to figure out how many years back recently. And it's been, I don't know how many years. It's been a while. And you are our exclusive and only
7 years.
7 years. Yeah, which is wild. Because if we look at the landscape of, publishers needing people who can be audiobook partners, ghostwriters needing audiobook partners, ghostwriters and publishers, like there's so many different kind of intersections and weaving in and out. Wow. And so it is beautiful to be in a conversation today with both you, Tina, and then also Ally, because you're both big collaborators. And as I said, Twin Flames is our only audiobook partner for a reason, because you and the team are fantastic and amazing. So
and we appreciate that.
Yeah. And you're just such a thought leader in the space too. And so I know that Ally is having continued tech issues. So I'm just going to start rolling with it with you, Tina. So if you want to share just a little bit of like any pertinent kind of details of your background and maybe how you got into audio in particular, we can kind of start there.
Yeah, if anyone had ever told me that I would own an audiobook company back when I was looking at, the world of what do you want to do when you grow up, was never on the radar, was never something even thought of. And the way we do audiobooks didn't exist at the time. The technology did not exist at the time because I'm 50. And it just didn't happen. We had books on tape. Moving into books and CD. Audiobooks weren't even digital yet. So my background is as an entrepreneur, as a therapist. I grew up as an entrepreneur. I was a business coach for many, many years, and I've worked with probably more than 30 industries in 8 countries. And it was in that process, because I was also a lapsed theater kid. And I still identify as a theater kid. If you start singing the beginning of a line of a musical, I will finish it. It's like a call and response. I can't help myself.
Oh, Ally, I think that's a call to action here for you.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, when they walk around trying to frame Roger and they're going shave and a haircut, and he can't stop himself from going 2 bits. It's the same thing. But it was in that time as I was business coaching, and I was voice acting as a paid hobby as this outlet, because I had 2 little kids, so community theater really wasn't going to happen. But I was able to do some voice acting, and that is when I took master classes in audiobook narration and discovered the audiobook industry, all the background of it, because my teachers, Tony Silveri and Pat Fraley, were very, very thorough in having us understand not just how to narrate, but the industry itself. And that's when the thunderclap happened, that I had this realization of, wait. Everybody's doing books. Everybody's writing books. Everyone wants a bestseller. Every self-publishing had opened up. And all of my clients and colleagues, everybody's writing books. Why isn't anybody talking about audiobooks? And that was the impetus that had me research the industry, find out there was a huge gap in the market where independent authors, nonfiction authors, non-traditional authors were not being served at all. And so being the entrepreneur that I am, that both pissed me off and inspired me. And that's when I started looking at creating a solution through audiobooks, because books and microphones have been 2 of my best friends since I was probably old enough to talk.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
What year was this kind of inspiration striking? Did you say that?
The inspiration striking was actually several years before I launched the company, which often happens with entrepreneurship. And and I always like to tell people, if you have an idea and it's worthwhile, cultivate it on a back burner in your mind. Ask the idea to stay with you, kind of, keep it in your cauldron, so to speak. And that's what happened with me with audiobooks. I was traveling internationally. I was a digital nomad before it was cool, with my family. And I think the inspiration happened around 2012. But it was 2015 before I really actively started designing what I wanted to do and everything. Some of the technology still was a little iffy and not in place to do the kind of things that we wanted to do with, say, remote recording, and also Audible still hadn't quite matured yet the way that they are now, and other audiobook platforms the same way. So I was keeping an eye on the industry during all that time, like we still do.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I think that is a very little subtle line of like we still do, because I think it is, I feel like it's my job to stay on top of publishing trends. It's your job to stay on top of publishing and audiobook trends. Right. And so I feel like I could ask you a million questions. Ally, I'm curious if you have any kind of starting point that you're thinking about in terms of like who's watching and what might be most valuable for someone who's like, yeah, maybe I have a book, but I don't have an audiobook yet. Because I feel like so many authors do not have audiobooks yet. It's just kind of like it's a nice to have, but there's like no imperative to have it. So curious.
I would say we need to start with like the basics. Because truthfully, because I feel like people are aware of what an audiobook is loosely, right? Like it's the verbalized version of a book, but like beyond that, I don't think that they really understand what goes into it. Do they narrate? Does somebody else narrate? How does that work? Do you have to go to a studio, or is there a way of doing it remotely? How does one price an audiobook in terms of actually producing it, right? These are all fresh because I literally was just having this conversation with somebody earlier this week. And I said, hey, by the way, on Thursday, come and hear what Tina has to say, because while I knew this at one point from one person's perspective, that was a while ago, and things change, right? And everybody's business models shift, and what we price for things shifts, and how we do things shifts. And of course, also with the wave of AI,
Which we should
I
talk
have no
about.
idea how that is shifting the creation, production, distribution, all the things of audiobooks. So yeah, I think let's start with the 101, and then maybe we could talk more specifically about like 2024 trends and how AI is like hitting things. That would be my take.
It's great.
All right,
Yeah,
cool.
so many things.
Well, let's go ahead and kind of break it down, because if I start on a blue streak, everybody's eyes are going to glaze over. It's just going to be like an audiobook wave. So I'll start with what I get asked the most is probably, is it worth it? Like, how do you make it worth it? Because audiobook is an investment of time and money, even if you take the time to learn how to do it all from scratch. And let's say you're not even going to want to do it yourself. You want to hire a narrator. There's a significant learning curve that goes into audiobooks, just like there's a significant curve that goes into writing and publishing a book. So that's the first decision point. Do you want to work with an expert? Do you want to take the time to do it yourself? The whole reason that we offer done-for-you services instead of courses is because I did a pretty significant market survey before we started offering services to decide that very thing. Like, do people want a course and do it themselves, or do they really need help? And I asked a question on this survey, and the question was, how do I usually get things done in my business? I take a course and do it myself, A. B, I hire someone to do it for me. C, I take a course, realize how much work it is, and then hire someone to do it for me. And it was an inspiration that I had because I know how I ended up doing things in my business. And I got so much feedback on that question. Dozens and dozens of people gave me feedback and went, you know what? Yep, I have wasted so much time trying to do things myself and still ended up having to hire someone to do it. Yeah. So that's why we do done-for-you services. And because it shortens the time frame for people to be out in their zone of genius. And that's really who we work with, are these folks who are experts. So doing another learning curve really isn't necessarily worth their time. So just the whole determination of time and money. And then the question we get is, well, am I going to make money with my audiobook? If you are a fiction writer, and my company works with nonfiction, because they are very, very different in terms of their business models. But if you are a fiction writer, I would definitely recommend, particularly if you are in fantasy, if you are in romance, if you are in sci-fi, if you are in true crime, if you are in thrillers, okay? Any of those, do the damn audiobook, because people eat those like potato chips. And you will probably make money doing that. In addition to the other versions of your book. There are some really rabid groups of people who constantly listen to audiobooks, groups like knitters and truckers. And the truckers listen to just as much romance and fantasy as anybody else. Let me tell you, it's funny. But in terms of the nonfiction side of the house, if you are expecting to make back your money on royalties of your audiobook, you probably should rethink your whole idea of publishing a book in the first place, because the nonfiction marketplace is really designed for people who are experts to leverage their expertise and build a platform, maybe make your money. We certainly always want to try to make your money back in your royalties, but the goods come on the back end with your courses, with your marketing, with your services, with your speaking gigs, with your media opportunities. And we will say that that's where we see our authors making the biggest gains and all that. So before we even get into production, these are the things you need to think about strategically to make the audiobook, certainly worth your while. I'm going to pause there and have a sip of water and decide where you guys want to go next.
Well, I have to say that my book, shameless plug for my book, I do talk about it in the beginning of your personal goals, your professional goals. How do you want the book to align with other opportunities? Because if your goal is to make money and a fortune, however we're defining
Yeah.
fortune, on royalties alone, you need to find a different way to make the money. And because it really is, it's the consulting, it's the coaching, it's the courses, it's the speaking. So I appreciate that you're kind of level setting with folks to say, because in theory, you could take anyone's money. I could take anyone's money, but
Yeah.
we're operating, same thing with Ally. We could all take anyone's money really, but ethically and from an aligned value standpoint, it's working with the people who we can see that there's going to be some kind of path for them to get a return on what that looks like. And
100%.
it's conversations like this that I think just kind of set the stage for that. So I love that you kind of started there. Does it make sense to kind of go into some of the technicalities, just like a little bit of what
Sure.
Ally was asking in terms of, especially like in a studio versus not a studio. Lord knows I've done it a number of different ways and have the scars to prove it.
Yeah.
So happy to see where you want to take that.
Yeah. So one of the market that I was looking to serve was my clients, my colleagues, people like myself. So nonfiction experts who have not necessarily a tremendous amount of time on their hands, but want really high quality. You want a product that you can use for years and years and years to come, not a flash in the pan situation. And of course, you want to do things right. So you don't want to end up producing an audiobook or what you think is an audiobook and then try to get it up onto audiobook platforms and be rejected by quality control.
Okay.
So that is a big, big issue in the industry because audiobooks aren't like podcasts. They get produced a very different way and they are far more technical. So we hear a lot, well, I'm a speaker. I can just produce my own. I'm a podcaster. Well, I can just produce my own. Sorry, no, you can't. Unless you're going to take the time to learn this entire other skill set, both with the narration and with the audio engineering of it. No, it's a different beast. And I have done it all. I have done podcasting, I've done speaking, I have done all these different video, audio and video mediums. They're all different. They require a big learning curve. So yes, if you are going to go and hire a local studio, you have to make sure that they actually know what they're doing specifically for audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
Most local studios are set up for music production, not voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
The room is different, the way it's set up. Vocal booths are small. Music studios are large. It's just a fundamental thing. The way that somebody directs you for an audiobook is different. So this is why we invented, I was a dog on a bone with this when we were first working through this, because I was like, I'm tired of looking for studios that can't follow through and give us the kind of quality we want in these recordings. Because I was training people in their narration and then finding the studios, and then we were doing the editing and mastering and distribution and the marketing consulting and all of that. So I said, screw it. And I ended up working with a guy named Paul Stefano, who's still on my team and a great guy, who's an audio engineer and a narrator. All of our team are pretty much audio engineers and narrators. And we invented a remote recording process for the company, specifically for this audience to address their specific needs. And that is what we are known for. That's what we are the premier provider in the world for, is remote recorded, author narrated nonfiction audiobooks, where we do all the recording, we do all of the technical, we do all of the directing live to the entire audiobook so that the author can focus on delivering the work the way that it's meant to be. Mm-hmm. And that's what really needs to be done. So we get files from folks who do their own audiobooks all the time, and we check them and all of that because we'll distribute it for them. 100% of the time, there's something wrong with the files. We've never, ever been delivered a set of files that something was ready to go, even from folks that claim to be well-versed in audiobook production. Because if you don't do the distribution process, you don't know the foibles that go into it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I feel pretty strongly about this.
Yeah. And the comparison that I see from the writing side of the world is editing, right? There are people who have a general basic grasp of the English language in this case, that say that they know how to edit, but it's not the same as someone who is a trained professional editor who knows how to use style guides, who knows what a structure should actually look like in long form content versus short form. Like being able to edit a blog is very different than being able to developmentally edit a book. So it's the same type of concept I
Totally.
see from the audio side of things.
I think that's 100% an accurate analogy. Really do.
I mean, honestly, I feel like it's kind of the same with like people who self-publish, like whether that's a print book or an ebook, right? Like to talk about our other editions. If you don't know all of the stops of the process and you're not really tech savvy, right? And you're not clear on the nuances within the industry itself, like that's where we get our crappy self-published books, right? Because people are just kind of piecemealing it together and trying to do it on their own without an expert guiding them along the way, right? Or even the simpler things, maybe simple isn't the right word. Maybe the smaller pieces to the puzzle, like the cover design. Cover design super important for packaging,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So important, right? And that cover is going to also be used, I would imagine, in the audiobook.
Yes.
Like, right? So cover design is really important. But how many people try to do that on their own using a template on Canva or Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator or wherever it may be, thinking that a template will be fine, or that they've got enough of a design eye to do it themselves and think that it looks fine or cute, but they really like it, right? And it's like, no, you can't. I'm sorry. I don't care if you like it. This looks like an amateur did it, and that's not the impression that you want for your book, right? So I feel like regardless of edition, regardless of how you're publishing, right? Hire the professional. Just do it. Save yourself the agony of what this thing will look like on the other side by doing it all on your own and thinking that you're going to figure it out.
Yeah. The benefit I would say for audio, because I couldn't agree more, is that at least with audiobooks, there is the system will reject the files because they are not meeting the standards. Just because your cover is terrible or it's poorly edited, the files don't get rejected. So Ally and I don't have any, we don't have anything to sink our teeth into to be like, well, the system won't take it. Whereas with audio, it's like the system won't take it because they're not meeting the standards. So
maybe we'll get to the point with AI where you go to upload a book to a platform and it comes back with a review. Pedantic and derivative needs further editing, or something like that.
Oh my God. Absolutely terrible. I actually was just with a new person the other night and she showed me the thing that she had created herself. And I went, no. And she was like, really? And I was like, yes, really. And she was like, oh, I really liked it. And I said, I know you do. And I'm sorry, but my answer is no. This is what you've come and meet up with me for, is my straightforward, honest expert opinion. And I'm telling you, don't do that. Now, that being said, I'm curious in the audiobook space, and I know I'm derailing here, but I've got to know the answer to this question. Is there ever somebody who absolutely should not narrate their own book?
Oh, absolutely.
And how do you tell them that? And what might be those reasons why they shouldn't narrate their own book? Please spill the tea.
This is one of my favorite topics, because if anybody who's a nonfiction author goes out and asks their family and friends, should I narrate my own book? Of course they're going to say yes. Of course they're going to. It's your story. No one can tell it like you did, all of that. Now, we specialize in author narration. So don't get me wrong. This is our wheelhouse. We are really, really good at this. But we ask some really specific questions of folks when they come to us about, are you going to enjoy this? Here's what the situation looks like. You are going to be recording in 2-hour blocks. And you are going to be either sitting or standing and reading your book. Are you a good reader? Do you have any medical conditions or developmental things that would prevent you from fluidly reading your book out loud for 2 hours? These are the questions we've learned to ask. How much are you going to think you'll like this versus, is this going to be horrible for you? And what's your calendar like? What's your calendar like? Do you have a ton of travel? Are you never in the same place? Because you have to be in a consistent spot to record an audiobook. So we ask all of these things, and then there's and that helps, right? So it helps the author. 95% of the time, they're just able to go, okay, I know I need to do that. I want to do this. I can arrange my life like that. So it's managing those expectations that's really important. And because a lot of our folks are speakers and coaches and things like that, they're eager to learn a new skill set or to deepen a skill set by doing this type of narration, because it's really cool to be able to train your voice in a new way. It actually helps a lot with breathing and delivery. Reading back your own material gives you all kinds of renewed creativity. You can find spots where you might say things differently or inspire new work. It's so neat to be able to do that. And because you're being directed through the process, you're being intensely listened to in a way that most people haven't experienced. It's one of the things I love hearing about the most, that we get a ton of feedback on from our authors. Like, I was so deeply listened to. I was so deeply seen and heard in this process. Like, it's an interesting side benefit to the whole process. Now, that being said, if somebody isn't going to be served by this process, and the work isn't going to be served by this process, and authors can still have their voice on the book. Well, we have a whole section of books that are what we call hybrid, or I call them Tony Robbins sandwiches, because a lot of times that's how Tony Robbins did all of his books. His books are 22 hours long. Man does not have time. So he would do the first chapter or two, introduce the narrator would do the middle, and Tony would come back at the end. So we do a fair number of these hybrid style books. The thing that we did better than Tony's publisher, his publisher chose a narrator that sounds nothing like Tony Robbins. Man has a very distinct voice. So we go through and find narrators, and this is anytime we're doing professional narration, where it might not be an exact voice match, but it's a good energy match, and key vocal qualities are very similar to the author. So it's not a jarring transition when there is professional narration. So we do an extensive 4-part vetting system for every single book, if it's professionally narrated, to make sure that match is there. So those are some of the ins and outs of the whole kind of narration, professional versus author narration, type of work. But I will say, everyone's always looking for the math on how long it's going to take. And I will say that you can expect to spend about 2.5 hours in recording for every 10,000 words. A little more if you have difficulties with your voice, maybe a little less if you're extremely seasoned in practice as a speaker.
I would say it took me 14 hours to record mine. 14.
And what's your word count?
68,000.
Yeah,
So
I was going to say that makes
right?
sense. Like, so if our nonfiction folks are on average 50,000 words, right? Like, they should expect like 10 hours.
10 to 12. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you do a pickup session to correct things in the aftermath and all of that kind of good stuff. But we try to catch as much as possible in the first recording session. And that's why the directors are there to kind of catch it and go, your energy really dropped on this. Let's go back to the beginning of the paragraph. Start again. You know what? You said this word instead of that word, and that actually changes the context of the sentence. Let's go back and do that again. So stuff like that.
Okay, so that brings up then that it's not just a 10 to 12 hour commitment for the author narrator, but it's a 10 to 12 hour commitment for the director. So I think that's really important. Like, I feel like it's easy for people to imagine themselves in front of a microphone in a booth, but there's literally somebody with them that entire time. Yes. So when they're thinking about the process, they're thinking about the investment in the process, right? Like, you have got a person who's 100% like for you, with you through that entire reading, looking for, it's almost like out loud developmental editing for speaking. Seriously.
It is in many ways. It is in many ways. And actually, all of our authors have at least 3 people in their corner dedicated to their book. So one is our VP of Publishing, Stephen George, and Stephen's the one advising them right from the get-go on the different types of narration available to them. He's the one that's basically going to do that initial piece and help them strategize. And then he's going to assign them who he thinks personality wise is going to be their best director. And then the director, they work with setting up, your space, which isn't complicated. We keep it really simple. Most of our authors end up recording in their home office or a walk-in closet. Very little thing. Microphones tend to range somewhere between $80 and $150. We have them tested and kind of proven. And then this person is listening to you this entire time, giving feedback, actually preparing ahead of time, making sure that the chapters that you're going to be reading and things like that, if there's any charts, graphs, pictures, things like that, call outs, whatever, that they and you are prepared to narrate those a certain way. So there's coaching that goes along. There are very emotional pieces of of a book. And our folks, because I'm a therapist in my background, I've trained all of my folks in active listening and how to hold space for people and how to know if you want to use that emotion or if you need to call it for the day and come back to it. Like these are skill sets that, are happening. And then of course we've got our editing team. So then we've got another set that's, listening and the mastering and the editing and all of that, making sure that your pacing and everything is really good on the back end. So there's a lot that goes into the care that we're putting into these books and making sure that they're showcased in the best possible light.
Because it takes a village. Like it really does. Like it's that expression. But I feel like, having gone through the process myself where for my memoir, I wasn't able to do the actual word editing without crying. And so I was like, I cannot possibly even attempt to narrate this thing. And so we found, like you were saying before, we found somebody that had the right energy match. And I just remember like having, sound bites, trying to find somebody who could like really capture the same tone. And I had somebody recently, because I don't think I sound anything like the person who narrated my book, but I talked to somebody maybe a month ago who was like, I could hear you saying it. Like I could hear you. And I'm like,
yeah, it's the energy of it.
I was like, but it wasn't me who read it. And she's like, I know, but it felt like you. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. But then like having actually done it in real time with you, or with Stephen, that's a whole other, because you said walk-in closet. I didn't have the benefit of a walk-in closet. I was shoved in my tiny little, New England style home closet in the middle of the summer with no air. So I did not pick the right timing for it, but
that is a thing.
It is a thing, but the process is smooth when you have the right people around you to be able to stop and start you and be able to say, like, start again, you're talking too fast or you're mumbling or whatever number of things might come up. So yeah, Ally, I think it's a really important distinction that you brought up, that like, yes, there's like someone who's also there for that 10 to 12 or however many hours who's like in real time with you. And it is confronting because they're like listening to every single thing, like every noise. You can hear a pin drop in the background, or if your stomach's growling, like there's like an intimacy to it as well that, like you said, Tina, it's not something that everyone gets to experience, to be like that intently listened to.
It is. I mean, and we have had situations where we've had conversation with authors like, I can actually hear your stomach growling. I need you to leave at least an hour between scheduling this and eating. And this isn't like, we give people a guide ahead and go through it with them. It's like, this is what you should wear. This is what you want to do energetically to help manage your energy. It's fun because it's a cool skill set that people end up receiving and learning more about. And then they report back to us that they're more effective in meetings. They're more effective on the stage. They're more effective in their podcast interviews because they know these little ways to elevate the professionalism that was already there, but now there's a little extra shine on it.
Yeah.
And I love hearing that. I also love hearing like one of our authors, Stephen Shedlinski, super amazing guy. He worked and I think still works extensively with Simon Sinek. And he actually narrated one of Simon's books. And they did it with one of the big publishing houses, of course. And he went into a New York studio and they banged it out. And he contrasted with me on our show, 5-Minute Advice for Authors, the experience. And he goes, it was so exhausting to push through that audiobook working with, I don't know if it was, was one of the big publishers, Random House or one of those, and working with you guys, because I felt like I was surrounded in this like personal nest where I could really take my time on the performance.
Mhm.
Whereas, banging out Simon's book, my narration was good, but I didn't have any time to reflect, and I needed a week to recover from doing it.
And you know what's interesting is I think from a reader standpoint or listener standpoint, so I have been a book judge for a number of different kind of book awards.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
In 1 year, I was an audiobook judge. Actually, I think I did it 2 years. And I had to listen for all of the things that would make something not like the absolute best of the best. And one of the things that I noticed is you can tell when someone did it in a bang out type of session because you can hear the tone or the pitch. I don't really know what the right terminology is here. Like you can hear it declining over the course of the book where it starts off really strong. And then by the time you're getting toward the middle or end of it, you can hear the energy level dropping. It feels a little bit more flat. It doesn't feel as, and I think the only reason I noticed that is because it was my job was to like listen to these audiobooks. And I was so intently listening. And I'm like, it makes sense to do it over. Like, I think mine was over a course of like two or 3 weeks or something like that, because then you get to be able to like kind of go in and like give it your all for those 2 hours and then walk away, versus I can't even imagine trying to done it for, like bang it out in like 1 or 2 days. Has to be completely exhausting. And it's probably not good for your vocal cords either, I imagine.
No, I mean, even professional narrators don't tend to narrate for longer than 2 hours at a shot. The human voice really isn't designed for that. And so particularly if, and you think about narrators and voice actors, they've got all of this practice like an athlete. And even if you're a speaker or a coach, though, there are some folks who keynote daily, but those are few and far between. And so that energy and keeping that energy high it really takes something. And we also like for folks to be able to prepare and try to read their chapters out loud ahead, because there's that neurological connection between your brain and your face. And you want to be able to do that in a more fluid manner. And then you end up having to stop less during the rehearsal process. Also, it doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes there are little things that will catch in the speaking out loud of a book that may have not been caught in the visual edit. So, and we talk about this all the time, how the best time to start your audiobook is when you finish your first draft, because you want to read it out loud, because it will make your writing so much better.
Yeah, we've definitely had, myself included, I think Stephen and I found 14 different typo changes that needed to be made as a result of reading it out loud. Yeah, and it's an exercise in patience. It's an exercise in a lot of things, going out of our comfort zones. Yeah. Ally, I feel like you had something to ask before, and then I derailed us.
Oh, wait. That's okay. We also had a weird buzzing doorbell, so I apologize if that rang through here in the middle of everything. I just can't get it together today, my friends.
That's why it's unscripted.
That's exactly why it's unscripted. Well, one thing that I was thinking about was just the vulnerability piece of being surrounded by all those different people who are hanging on your every word. And for memoirists, because that's really where I like to spend my time the most in the work that I do, this is incredibly important, because a lot of the impetus behind writing a memoir is not just to impact somebody else and pay it forward, right? Have them not feel like they're alone in their experience, but also for the person who's been through it to be seen and heard and validated. And that's usually secondary. I don't think that a lot of memoirists realize that they're still looking for that piece when they set out to write, but I think it's very much a part of developing that type of work. And I feel like by doing the audiobook, it's elevating that be seen, heard piece to the next level, right? Because when your book goes out, it touches many, but you might not get those reviews. You might not talk to the people who get the book, right? Similarly, the audiobook could go out and you might not know who's listened to the book, but by being in the studio surrounded by warm, welcoming, inviting people who are holding a physical and emotional space, right, to produce a fine end product, it is the epitome of being seen and heard. So that was one thing that was coming up. But the second thing that was coming up was a more logistical or practical element to this, which is I have to imagine that with that many people involved, plus the tech, plus the editing, the booth time, right? Like all those things have to be factored into cost, right? In publishing, it's like a lot of stuff is factored in by word, right? But Tina, how do audiobooks get priced in terms of somebody considering producing one for their book?
Well, audiobook production costs can vary wildly depending on how things get done. So to work with us on average, our audiobooks are about 3 to 5K. We are very mid-market. We are actually considered very reasonable in the audiobook space. And we do that because we don't want cost to be an impediment, and we also pay our people well. And so there's that balance that we're always striking between the two things. Like all of our people have like 20 years of experience plus. Everybody is based in the US. Like everybody is really committed to producing the best possible quality work. So that all factors in. So you can get audiobooks done really on the cheap, super on the cheap. If you want to work with a new narrator who's just making a name for themselves, if you want to just work with Audible and do what's called a royalty share, and you find somebody who is up and coming, and you're willing to commit to a 7-year royalty share and only having your audiobook on Audible, that is probably the way to have no upfront costs. Or you can actually do what's called a royalty share plus, which is you pay a certain amount upfront to cover the narrator's time, and then you do a royalty share on the back end. So there's lots of ways that you can do it and save money if you're working with a professional narrator. If you are trying to do the audiobook yourself, you're talking about time. You're talking about making sure that you have your space set up. You're making sure that you are going through the learning curve of all of the recording technology, the setup, the noise floor, having the right room and the right space. And then ultimately, you really don't want to edit your own audiobook, just like you can't edit your own book. It's almost impossible to do that. So having somebody, it's going to cost you somewhere between $50 and $150 for every 9 or 10,000 words of your audiobook to have it at minimum work with an independent contractor. And then you actually have to find somebody who actually knows what they're doing, because there's lots of people out there who say, I edit podcasts, I can edit your audiobook. No, no. Unless they have books that they can point to and say, this made it through quality control. That is your gold standard if you're looking for somebody and you're not working with us, which you should. So that's the long and short of it. Those are some of the things you have to kind of take into consideration, cost-wise. But nothing ventured, nothing gained, and quality costs either, time or money, or both.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. I'm looking at the time. It's already 1:45. So, and I know that Tina's got some thoughts on AI and audiobooks, and I feel like we got to go there. We got to push on that button and see what Tina has to say before we need to wrap up and do our final shameless plugs and telling people when we're coming back next. So, Tina, AI and audiobooks.
Yes.
What is there to say?
So I have to say up front, I am not opposed to AI. I am not, it's coming, oh Lord, it's coming. I mean, it's one of those things, like it's here. The question is, what is it good for right now? What might it be good for in the future? So specifically for audiobooks, what people need to know, I actually wrote an extensive article about this. If you go to the twinflamestudios.com blog, there's a whole article breaking this down. And we went as far as one of our directors had a professional voice clone done with a company that does this ethically. And it's like ethically sourced voiceovers. And we compared that. We have that AI passage of narration compared to a natural voice of him doing the same passage. And he wasn't trying, he was trying his best on both of those. So you can hear the direct difference of the same voice, natural versus AI. And so this is the kind of thing you don't get to hear when you're out in the world shopping around for things like audiobooks, because there are some tools out there where there's a lot of, we can make a voice clone in a minute or 2 minutes of your time. that is a very basic voice clone. And if you look deeper in any of the literature or any of the companies that offer voice cloning, you will see a professional voice clone takes a minimum of 4 to 6 hours of voice recording. So if you really want a professional voice clone done, you should do your audiobook, have us record it for you, and then use the recording to create your voice clones to do things that it's better for, like short form, right? Short form voiceover. Use it for your own voiceover to voiceover your reels and things like that. You know, if you're doing faceless videos and things like that, great. Use your voice clone to do that kind of voiceover. But for an audiobook, we're still not there yet on a couple of really important things. The emotional content is not up to par. That's first thing. The breathing is not up to par. That's what causes the uncanny valley sensation when you're listening to AI audio and you're like, it's just like making you twitch just a tiny bit, particularly on a long form. Short form, we don't notice as much. Long form, it gets really irritating over time. And so the breathing isn't there yet. That is coming. ChatGPT actually has things in alpha testing. We've heard it. And I'm like, holy crap, that's really good. But that's going to take a fair amount of time before that hits the public. And that technology still is not associated with the voice cloning technology. So it's not necessarily going to be in somebody's voice. It's going to be in these completely artificial voices. So quite honestly, it's much more of a threat to the fiction audiobook industry than the nonfiction audiobook industry, where folks are really looking to have their own unique voice narrating their audiobook. So those are a couple of things that people really, really need to know. But here's the bottom line. They don't sell. 1,500 audiobooks were made using AI in 2023. 1,500, that's it. You have to remember, there are 2,700 books published a day in the US. Only of the 2,700 books that got published every damn day, 365 days in the US, only 1,500 audiobooks total were produced using AI last year. And there's no sales numbers. They're not selling. People don't want them. So that's really the bottom line that we have to remember, is that there is not an appetite for AI voices in our ears for that long period of time as yet. Could that change down the road? Yes, things change all the time. But specifically with audiobooks, AI is just not there yet.
I think that's the case for just a regular, written book as well, is that I don't know that the appetite is there either from readers to know that this was generated by ChatGPT. And I think that audio is just a much more intimate experience. So I can see, I'll be curious to see 2024, how many were generated through AI in 2024 for the audiobooks. And if the numbers still are as low as they were last year.
It's pretty low. I mean, and even the big publishers signed some AI contracts toward the end of last year, I believe, for AI audiobooks. For AI audiobooks, and there's no news. That's actually one of the reasons why I wrote the article, because in 2023 we heard a lot about it. In 2024 there was nothing published about AI and audiobooks, so that's why I went out and did that extensive article on the state of the industry and where it stands.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye
Now,
on it.
can people access that article? You might have said this, and I might have been distracted by a son.
Yeah, it's on the blog on the Twin Flame Studios blog. So if you just go to our website, twinflamestudios.com, and click on Insights, that'll take you to our blog, and wasn't published that long ago, so it'll definitely be there.
Beautiful. Okay, because we definitely want to highlight for our readers, for sure. Readers, watchers, listeners.
All the
things. Oh my gosh. I don't even know where I am right now. Tina, what else is there to say? Like, if you have one more mic drop wisdom nugget thing that you want to share before we let people know where to connect with you and what you've got coming up, like what's that last piece of advice or wisdom for our folks?
Yeah, when you're thinking about getting your voice out into the world, specifically through an audiobook, I always want people to remember that you are going to have a body of work in this audiobook that is your voice with your message that is probably somewhere between 4 and 8 hours long. That's a lot of talking. And so if you really want to develop that know, like, and trust factor with people, you want to be a trusted voice in somebody's head, which is that deep relationship, then an audiobook is really a beautiful way to go about that. And that body of work, that 4, 6, 8 hours of audio can be sliced and diced for years to come and turned into different sound bites that you can use all over the damn place. So we always want to see our authors making the most out of their audiobook. Authors get so tired of their own message and saying things over and over again, but it is the visceral fortitude that it takes to get your message out there over and over, believing in what you have to say, that actually makes people remember you. You know, it's why Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People was a household name, still is, because how many hundreds of thousands of times did that man say those 7 habits?
Mhm.
And so we have to get used to hearing our own voice and saying our message and being persistent and getting our voices out there over and over and over again. And that's actually what makes the biggest change over time. It's that willingness to stay the course. And so I really want to see folks using the audiobook that way, all over the place in all those different ways, so that, you know, if you get a message that's out to change the world, that's the persistence that it takes.
I love that.
Love it. Love it. So what you got coming up? What do you want to shamelessly plug?
Shamelessly plug. Well, we actually do have an audiobook, another webinar where we're going to dig into probably some more of the technical details, the ins and outs, a lot of the frequently asked questions. I'm, even this wasn't even full fire hose capacity for me talking about audiobooks. So if anybody who wants to really dive into that, you can reach out to me, DM me on any of the major social platforms, except for X, they suck. And so social platforms, you can find Twin Flame Studios or me, Tina Dietz, and you can send me a DM, or you can go to our website. And we are having that webinar come up on September 19th. But you can also sign up for our newsletter at twinflamesstudios.com and download. We have a really cool guide to audiobook production that you can find there through looking at any of our articles. There's always a sign up at the bottom of any article. So happy to help folks wherever they're at in their process and make sure questions get answered.
I love that. Tina.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being with us today, Tina.
Oh,
You're just
thanks for the invite. This is really a good time.
All the wisdom, all the nuggets. Jen, you have anything to shamelessly self-promote before we jump up? Before we wrap up? I apologize that I
You're
have
all
the
good.
second narrator.
Yeah. There's 4 of us today. I like it. So yes, I have 2 things to shamelessly promote. So one is our Getting Started for Authors writing program. It is a 6-month intensive to get the idea out of your head and a book on the page. And that starts on September 24th and it goes through April 11th, I believe are the dates. And then we also have a new program, which I don't even think I talked about it on our last show, Ally, called Promote Your Purpose. And it's a 6-month writing program. A marketing program that is for authors who may or may not have worked with PYP. So for years, I've had people say, when are you going to help other people market their books that are not a PYP author? And I'm like, it's not on my agenda. However, it's now on the agenda. And so we're doing a beta program. It starts on September 17th. And I'm really excited about that. We have room for 10 people. So we have a couple of spots left. And the information is on our website. And I will drop it in the chat and all the other places. So we are full circle, whether it's writing, publishing, or marketing. We are a fit if you are a thought leader trying to get your message out there.
Amazing. I don't got a lot going on right now, folks. I'm saying no to a lot of things to create some space for leveling up and diving in with where I want to go next. What I can say is that I am looking for some market research right now. So if you are listening to this and you have been thinking about a memoir, but you've been sitting on your hands about it, I'd love to know why. What is blocking you? That is what I need to know, because I'm developing a new video training series that I would like to be focused on those blocks and barriers, the things that are really jamming up your memoir mojo. But I need to know in your words what that is, so I can make this divine. So I'd love just feedback from all of you who are listening and interested in working on that type of genre. So we're going to wrap up now. We're coming back next month in September. I believe we're
The
going to be live on the 19th. We don't have our topic chosen yet, but you all know it's going to be fabulous because every single one of these is. So I think that's a wrap for today. Yes, Jen?
I think so. Yeah. Thank you again, Tina. As you know, I adore you as a human,
adore
personally
you.
and professionally.
Yes.
So always nice to talk to you. I appreciate
Thank you both. This is awesome. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
You're
All right. We'll
welcome.
see
Thanks for
everyone
being
next time.
here.
Yeah.